She disappeared from the story for decades, and then, all at once, she stepped back into it with one sentence that changed everything. "We're friendly, but not close." That was Elizabeth Weber's answer when people pressed for the headline version. Are you and Billy Joel still in each other's lives? Not a reunion, not a long smoldering feud, something more ordinary and somehow more shocking. Civility without closeness. A truth that's simple on the surface and complicated everywhere underneath. It's the kind of line that makes you replay the old songs with new ears and re-examine the myth that built itself around them. What does friendly but not close really mean when the history includes love, betrayal, lawsuits, and the kind of fame that wears grooves into a person's life like a needle locked in a favorite record? Or there were arenas and anthems. There was a small apartment and a band trying to make rent. Billy Joel bunked with his drummer friend, John Small, and John's wife, Elizabeth L. It was crowded with guitars, drum cases, and decisions no one knew they were making. People shared a kitchen. People shared Then they shared something they shouldn't have, and the floor gave way. Billy and Elizabeth fell for each other. The band fractured. The friend group broke into awkward islands where everyone pretended the air wasn't heavy. The oldest version of the story painted Billy as the homewrecker, the thief of a friend's marriage and a group's momentum. But Elizabeth has pushed back on that label. It's not a melodrama, she'd say. It wasn't a fairy tale before Billy walked in, and it wasn't a cartoon villain act after. 3 people made choices in a cramped space, and the blast radius lasted years. That's the difference between rumor and reality. Rumor likes clean villains. Reality rarely does. Billy carried the fallout like a winter coat he couldn't take off. In the early 70s, long before he was immortal, he spiraled hard enough to try and check out twice. People who've never touched that level of despair imagine it as a loud moment, a chaotic spectacle. It's usually the opposite. It's quiet. It's a room you can't think your way out of. It's a night that keeps pretending to end and never does. Here's the detail that never fits into the tabloid script. John Small, the friend Billy betrayed, helped pull him back. That's not myth. That's the strange math of real forgiveness, where the person you hurt most decides to show up anyway. The guilt didn't vanish. It calcified into something Billy learned to live with. He turned to the only structure that made sense: song. The piano became both confessional and shield. Melody, the only safe place to stand when everything else felt like thin ice dot. Then Elizabeth stepped into a different role and changed the trajectory. People like to reduce her to muse, a silhouette at the edge of a piano bench. That's convenient and completely wrong. She was Billy's manager. She took calls, set terms, drew lines in rooms where nobody wanted lines. She fought for songs that didn't seem obvious on paper and insisted they were obvious in the heart. There's one in particular everyone knows, an easy glide of a ballad that sounds inevitable now, but didn't then. Just the Way You Are wasn't an automatic green light. It needed a champion. She was that champion. That push mattered. It mattered for radio, for awards, for the kind of cultural stickiness you can't manufacture on purpose. Look, it's fair to note that managers advocate for their artists every day. That's the job. But some decisions are turning points, and this was one of them. The record didn't simply climb. It took a helicopter straight up. You can call that luck if you want. Or you can admit that instinct, when it's correct, looks like luck to everyone who didn't have it first. This is where the reputation arrived. A woman making hard calls in the 70s music business earned adjectives that stuck like burrs: controlling, calculating, cold. Flip the gender, and those same choices get translated as decisive, protective. People can argue about her style all they want. The outcomes sit there, impossible to ignore. She brokered deals, kept sharks at bay, and sliced away distractions until the work could speak for itself. She wasn't soft about it. She wasn't supposed to be. The office of person who makes the machine run is not for the faint of heart. You defend your artist from everyone, critics, labels, friends who want favors, and sometimes you even defend your artist from himself. That kind of job doesn't earn applause in the moment. It earns distance, resentment, and 1,000 stories told sideways in hotel bars by people who forget where the hits came from. If the narrative ended there, it would be thorny but manageable. They married, they worked, they argued, they created, but the ugliest chapter carried a familiar last name and detonated long after their marriage ended. He discovered that his money wasn't merely mismanaged, it was bleeding out. Manager at the center, Frank Weber Elizabeth's brother, Billy, filed a massive suit. Dollar figure so high it sounds like a movie prop. There were denials and the grim arithmetic of what trust costs when it vanishes. This is where careful language matters. Accusations surfaced. Court papers argued the details. Settlements and recoveries lived in the fine print. What stuck long after the legal dust was the feeling that someone inside the circle had siphoned off a vein and left the artist dizzy. Billy responded the way Billy always does. He put it into songs. When he sings about walls, distance, and money turning strange, you can hear the ledger close. None of that landed at Elizabeth's feet, but the Weber name returned to headline. Like a ghost, no one invited back. That's a cruel part of family ties. The mistakes of one Weber boomerang across the face of another. Time kept moving. Rolled, records aged into classic. People who were once constant became holiday acquaintances. Elizabeth made the rarest decision in the Fane ecosystem. She went quiet, not sulking, not plotting, not pitching a book. Just quiet. For years, decades, even. Her absence helped the myth machine fill in the gaps with whatever it wanted. She became the woman in the songs, the power behind the throne, the cold executive. Misunderstood strategist, pick your favorite, spin it hard, and you'll find someone nodding along. But silence doesn't last forever, and when a new documentary went digging, she decided to step into the frame with the kind of measured clarity that only arrives with age. She showed up calm, present, unfazed by the camera's appetite for narrative arcs. She didn't deliver a gotcha. She didn't beg for credit. She corrected where rumor had raced ahead of fact, and then sat back, letting the music and the memories do the heavy lifting. Her son, Sean, added a layer fans weren't expecting. He was the kid in the crosswinds, the boy who grew up inside this complicated house of art and ambition. He spoke about reconnecting with Billy later, not with fanfare, but with emails and time, two of the least cinematic tools in the world, and two of the most reliable. The point isn't to force a Hallmark ending. The point is that relationships evolve outside of headlines. A family story doesn't need a climactic scene to be real. Sometimes it's just a year of small notes, then another year, then suddenly it's been enough time that the wound doesn't sting every morning. That details, so ordinary you could miss, it tells you more about the current landscape than any celebrity Q&A could. It's how real life looks after the music fades and the crew rolls the cases out to the truck. Layer Billy's health on top of that, and the picture sharpens. He's older now. The body keeps its own calendar. Diagnosis with a technical name flashed across the news and made fans worry. He told people he felt okay, that he was following orders, that the label sounded scarier than the day-to-day. Elizabeth, after all this time, said she hoped he recovered. Think about how simple that is, and how enormous. She did not swing for a reunion narrative. She did not audition for the role of public caretaker. She did what decent people do when someone they once loved faces a hard season. She wished him well and stayed in her lane. That's what friendly, but not close, looks like in practice. It's a boundary, not a cold shoulder. It's a line, drawn with a steady hand. It says, I see your humanity, I remember our history, and I'm going to stand over here where my life lives now. The songs remain, They always do. She's got a way still feels like a hush falling over a crowded room. She's always a woman still divides listeners who hear it as a love letter or a warning. Just the Way You Are still plays in 1,000 receptions every weekend, wrapped around a promise people don't fully understand when they make it. Knowing more about Elizabeth doesn't ruin those tracks, it deepens them. The Muse business is messy. Real people don't fit the template. She could be both the person who made Billie feel seen and the person who told a record label to get out of the way because they were about to miss the moment. She could be the woman who steadied him through one kind of storm and the woman who would not soften her decisions because they were married. People want saints and villains. Most days, you get a complicated human being doing the best version of the job in front of her. So, where does that leave the old homewrecker line? The narratively satisfying but morally lazy slam that's been tossed around for years leaves it looking simplistic. Elizabeth won't carry it. She insists it wasn't that kind of story. John Small, the person who could hold a grudge forever and call it righteous, chose a different path. He helped save Billie when he could have turned away. People who prefer a tabloid arc hate that kind of nuance because it kills the appetite for outrage. But nuance is just another word for truth you can live with. The older everyone gets, the less interested they are in playing cartoon roles for strangers. That's another quiet reason. Her sentence-friendly, but not close hit like it did. It's the anti-myth. It refuses to let you slow clap for reconciliation or gasp at a fresh feud. It just lays there, stubborn and calm, and asks you to accept reality. It also hints that the hardest part of their story isn't the breakup or even the lawsuit news cycle. It's the years after, when you figure out how to live with someone's ghost who isn't actually dead. Every massive relationship leaves behind a geography you don't fully escape, a restaurant you don't visit, an album you skip, a city you pass through a little faster than you need to. People think celebrities get free of that because fame distracts them. Fame just turns the ghost into a public monument. That's why silence was such an intelligent tactic for Elizabeth. She gave the story no fresh oxygen. She let time do its work. When she finally spoke again, it wasn't to refight old battle. It was to clarify what the present looks like. The past can keep whatever mystery it needs. The present is tidy enough to live in. And if you step back far enough to see the whole arc, it looks less like a scandal reel and more like a human education. He learned that guilt doesn't evaporate just because success arrives. He learned that talent can pull you through the darkest hours, but it cannot balance a checkbook and it cannot certify a contract. He learned that the person who loves you can also be the person who tells you no, and that those no's can save your career even if they bruise your ego. Elizabeth learned how much heat a woman attracts when she enforces a boundary or demands a standard. She learned that people will subtract your complexity until only the convenient outline remains unless you insist on being whole. She learned that the loudest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace that doesn't need applause. You can feel some viewers wanting a juicier answer. A thunderclap phrase that turns the documentary into a courtroom or a wedding chapel. That hunger is precisely why her answer works. A clique wants drama. A life needs clarity. A show needs acts and scene breaks. A person needs mornings that aren't haunted and nights that aren't performative. Civility without closeness gives you that. It's not a tease, it's an end state. She's not in his inner circle. She's not rewriting their history. She's not angling for credit, throwing blades, or shopping for redemption. She's stepping out of a spotlight she never asked for, and returning to the ordinary scale where happiness tends to live. The art is immortal in a way none of them are. That's the bargain every artist and every person around an artist makes, whether they admit it or not. The songs outlive the fights. The hooks outlast the gossip. It doesn't mean the personal part was meaningless. It means the work gets custody of the future. When people waltz to Just the Way You Are, they're not voting on a marriage from the 70s. They're converting their own life into melody for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. When people belt New York State of Mind, they're not tracing the exact day someone signed a contract. They're tapping into a city-sized feeling that doesn't belong to any one story. How legacy works, messy inputs, clean inputs. We metabolize the chaos into a chorus we can carry. There's also something oddly encouraging about the grown-upness of this whole thing. So many celebrity updates sound like high school forever. Subtweets disguised as press statements, breakup albums sharpened into daggers, reunion photos engineered to crash timeline. This isn't that. This is two people who survived the rising action, the climactic conflict, and the blurry montage that followed. They arrived at a détente that doesn't ask the audience for a reaction shot. It asks the audience to nod and move on. There's dignity in that. There's also a lesson. You don't have to attend every storyline you're invited to. You can wish someone well and keep your distance. You can be the reason a song exists and still decline to be a character in Season 3. If you absolutely need a twist, here it is. The most dramatic, surprising, and useful revelation is that there isn't a twist. The muse is not a witch or a saint. The artist is not a monster or a martyr. The X is not a vault of untold horrors or a fountain of second chances. They are complicated, aging, real. She can be proud of the records and critical of the business. He can admit to his darkest nights and still fill a stadium with light. They can occupy the same city and never cross paths, and that can be healthy. The story isn't a cliffhanger, it's a coda. And there's a reason that coda resonates more clearly now than it might have 10 or 20 years ago. We live in a moment allergic to ambiguity. Everything has to be exposed, revealed, shattered, redeemed. Her one-sentence update refuses that script. It allows mystery to survive. It lets fans hold two truths at once. She was crucial, and it's over. He is grateful, and he's elsewhere. They are civil, and that's enough. If that feels unsatisfying, it might be because we learned to crave a sugar high from the way stories are packaged now. But a real meal leaves you steady, not buzzing. This story, at last, is a meal. So here's how you carry it forward. When someone brings up the old gossip, you can shrug and say it's more complicated than that tanned. Not in a coy way, in an adult way. When a favorite track comes on and someone starts reciting the trivia, a cue, you can add the footnotes that matter. The manager who fought for the single, cue. The friend who forgave when it counted. The son who rebuilt a bridge without turning it into a spectacle. The superstar who learned that success doesn't immunize you against betrayal. And the woman who got tired of being reduced to a trope and chose a sentence that restored her humanity. Friendly, but not close. 5 words that give a lifetime its outline without dragging you through every room of the house. In the end, that's what this update does. It takes a tabloid maze and replaces it with a straight, well-lit hallway. You walk down it. You see the pictures on the walls, the early band, the fragile months, the studio dates, the award nights, the ledger with all the wrong numbers, the courtroom door, the quiet years, the documentary lights, the measured answers. Then you step out into daylight. No final twist, no grand reveal, just resolution. It's sturdy, it's sane, it's real. And if you listen carefully, there's music underneath it all. A piano figure you've heard 1,000 times. Clear and unpretentious, moving forward without rushing, leaving space where the story used to shout. That's the sound of two people who found a way to make the past livable and the present peaceful. If you wanted a big closing statement, let it be this: she mattered, he mattered, and the work they made mattered most of all. The rest is weather. And right now, the forecast is calm.